Hey everyone, welcome to the KE Report and a company update from Aztec Minerals, chatting with Simon Dyakowski. Simon is the president and CEO of Aztec Minerals. Company is traded on the TSX Venture Exchange under the symbol AZT and on the OTCQB under the symbol AZZTF. Now, we're going to be sharing some of the figures from the most recent news release that the company just released yesterday, March 30th, announcing a new high priority CRD target, so a carbonate replacement target at the Tombstone Project in Arizona. This target was developed using some of the past drilling and some other surface work that the company has done. Simon's going to share his thoughts on these figures just because these figures really do highlight the size of this target and allow us to explain a little bit better the geology around this new target. So Simon, starting off with figure one, look, it's pretty obvious where this target is. It's almost right in the middle of the project. And I think most importantly, right by that hole from last year, TR24-16. That came, I believe, near the end of the program, if not at the end of the program, and was one of the better results from the program, plus, in a way, kind of a new discovery. So, Simon, take us through how you have now developed and generated this new CRD target on the project, please.
Corey, thanks so much for having me on the show today to walk through these new targets. And it's a pretty exciting next step for Aztec to be able to showcase some of the new information that we've gained on the big prize at Tombstone, which is the potential for discovering a large sulfide CRD or carbonate replacement style deposit at depth. And we've always known about this potential at Tombstone, given the project's history and what they were mining historically here underground back in the day, 100+ years ago. It shares some striking similarities with the Taylor Hermosa discovery made by Arizona Mining. And also, it's very similar geologically to the massive Bisbee porphyry system that has some of the same CRD hallmarks as well. And that's been mined out many decades ago, but it gives us almost a blueprint of what we could hope to explore for at depth. Bisbee is about 30 minutes drive down the highway, and we actually take analysts down there and show them sort of the model geology of what these systems can look like. In the big hole in the ground, you can see all the changes in mineralization and alteration and whatnot. So it's pretty cool to have that comp right there. But what we're looking at here is basically our existing drill hole database, the drill holes that we've pursued, mostly shallow at Tombstone over the past 5 years. And then we've highlighted in red 2 holes that were drilled late last year, 13 and 16 of the 24 RC program. Now, these are pre-callers. What that means is that we drilled these specifically with deeper drilling in mind. And how we did that was we left the casing in the hole so that we can re-enter them at a future date and complete them to depth with core. And the reason that we did this is because it's a little bit challenging to drill through what's known as the Bisbee sediment rocks at the surface with core. It's much more appropriate to drill them with reverse circulation or RC. But then once we're into the more competent limestone, it makes sense to go and get the full geologic picture with intact core coming out of the ground. So 13 and 16 were drilled with that in mind. You can see where they are on this plan map. And 13 is to the north. It's near the west side area that we call it, which was an area that was slated to go into open pit production in the early 80s, but never came to pass due to some commodity price fluctuations back in that Hunt Brothers era. But we had a very successful pre-collar hole there. I'll get into the results in a moment. And then you can see 16 is actually targeted right into the middle of this AMT anomaly. So that is audio frequency magnetotelluric surveys that we did through Zong International back in 2020. And this is the superimposition of an 800-meter depth slice onto our plan view. So that anomaly there, which is a resistivity low, which indicates the potential for conductivity, that's 800 meters deep. And it actually starts at 600 meters deep, but it gets to its sort of widest at 800 meters deep. So it's it's at least 200+ meters high, and about 500-600 meters across and 400-500 meters north-south. So it's a big target. It sits, right in the middle of our private patented mining claim package at Tombstone. And hole 16 was really just designed to have the best angle to attack it. And we actually hit some of the best mineralization, or maybe the best mineralization shallow that we've ever hit at Tombstone. And I'll just flip over to that to show you. But we hit right at the top of the hole is the top of the pre-collar, which we extended down to 264 meters. We hit 67 meters of 230 grams per ton silver equivalent. And that was part of a broader shallow intersection of 106 meters of 147 grams silver equivalent, with some decent numbers even below it still. So what this is telling us is that the mineralization here, it's very strong. And you can see here on cross section how the hole is really heading towards that bullseye target at depth, starting at 600 meters and strengthening to 800 meters deep. So in our upcoming drilling, we do plan to extend these two holes down to depth and test these geophysical targets. And, technically, there's numerous reasons why we have support for this target. Not being a geologist, but essentially, we are seeing everything that you want to see above a CRD system. There's very strong evidence of hydrothermal fluid flow driving this near surface mineralization from directly below. And really, all we have left to do, I mean, we could study this probably, academically for years to come, but what we really need to do now is drill these targets, right? We need to get the truth machine out and see what's driving this mineralization in this primary target here at hole 16. And we also want to confirm some of the historic CRD mineralization that occurs below hole 13. And I'll flip back to the plan map to reorient everybody there. But, about 500 meters north or northwest of hole 16 is the collar for 13. And I'll show you on cross section what that looks like now. Very similar, shallow silver mineralization in the Bisbee group near surface, and a pre-collar drilled down to about 185 meters, which is just starting to get into these limestone nova culite units, and now aimed right at the Naco limestone, as it's called. These are the rock units. And then as you get further into the Naco, there's a historic CRD intersection of just over 7.1 meters, 1 ounce per ton silver, combined 9.1% lead, zinc, and 0.6 copper. So that's a meaningful width, and that's a semi-massive sulfide intersection at depth. And that really is probably the strongest evidence for what we're trying to do with this project, is to build on that discovery that was drilled by a predecessor company to us back in the late 1980s.
Okay, Simon, let's go back to that hole 16 then. That one, again, that's more in the center part of the project. You did get some of the good grades closer to surface, but clearly you still have a number of meters to go until you get to that resistivity target. What have we seen in other CRD targets near surface then? Is it common to have this sort of mineralization above these CRD targets?
Yeah, it is. And I guess the best comp for that is Hermosa, Taylor. So before the big deep discovery was made and built upon back 10 years ago by Arizona Mining, they were pursuing the silver manganese system near surface. So that is quite similar to what we're seeing here. I would caution investors, though, to recognize that our silver is hosted in a mineral known as cerargyrite, which is amenable to open pit heap leaching. It's soluble. So that's a little bit of a difference and a distinction that needs to be made, because, part of the reason that Arizona Mining did go deeper was because they had trouble with the recoveries of the silver in their shallow deposit. So just want to make sure that's very clear that we don't have that exact same problem. But yeah, above this sort of geologic contact, you will see, decent precious metal deposits as well. So this is all very common. And the trick now is to chase it down to depth.
So, since that is the next step, start drilling this target. Yes, you need to drill some deep holes down here, but this is such a large target. So, how do you go about attacking a target like this? Again, that from that big project map looks to be at least 500 meters in width. So, what will it take to test it, and how quickly will you be able to find out if this truly has that CRD potential?
That's a great question. So we do want to give it a fair shake. We are still in the planning stages of, ultimately, how many holes to drill. Certainly these two will be drilled, 13 and 16. The pre-collars are there. That's what they were made for. But, essentially, I'll go back to the plan map. There are other targets similar to this. Potentially, we would add another pre-collar to come at this AMT anomaly from another angle. And we do have platforms constructed to hit the anomaly to the southwest here. So I think a safe assumption would be, obviously subject to funding and further technical due diligence and analysis. So I want to, caveat that. But I'd say 3 deep tests would be a good minimum to start with. And that would likely be integrated with further shallow drilling around hole 16. I mean, you can't just drill 7.2 kilo silver equivalent, at a very shallow depth. Let me just reiterate how shallow that was. This is the surface line, and this is, within 30 to 40 meters of the surface. So that's very high value potential ore that needs to be followed up on by shallow drilling. So we would integrate these two programs of shallow and deep drilling and continue to pursue the shallow silver gold system, which, at 3,050 gold and $34 silver just becomes all the more compelling as sort of a parallel exploration strategy to the deep targets. So, it's really exciting to have 2 possibilities like that, not just one. And, obviously in exploration, this is common to have distinct targets, but to have them this well developed with, a base of a resource being developed at the shallower, less risky target, that's, I think very valuable. And it's in keeping with our business plan here. Maybe this is to our detriment, but we're not like a drill and kill exploration company. We do have a very valuable asset here on very attractive private land in Arizona, past production. These are intangibles to be in a mining friendly, county, let alone state, with past production, with known heap leach economics. So we can't just ignore the shallow target, but we also can't ignore the deep target. So, maybe it's not your typical, hey, we got a big target, we're going to drill it, see what happens. If we hit, great, we're rich. If we don't hit, okay, we roll it back. That's not our game plan, right? We're very serious about building a company here, and a valuable one at that.
So, real quick follow up on this target below this hole 16. Any other deep historic drill holes at this one, or has this one not been drilled deeper by other operators?
The great question. So the only deep hole on our property is this hole that's just underneath our 13 pre-collars. So that's called T8, drilled by Santa Fe. But if you've noticed, T8 is in a sequence, presumably starting from 1. And so the other dozen or so holes were actually drilled all around the pit, and most of them off of our property. And, they hit some skinny intersections, up to 1 to 2 meters of sulfide mineralization at depth. They didn't hit the proverbial mother lode. And the reason that they didn't drill into this anomaly is because, hopefully you'll notice, this is the site of the past producing open pit heap leach. So the operator of the deep drilling project didn't want to have anything to do with the cleanup of the open pit heap leach. Now that was in the 80s. So fast forward nearly 40 years. And, it's a completely different scenario. We now own all of that old open pit heap leach disturbance, and we've been dealing with that accordingly. So we have no qualms about drilling deep. And our geophysical data, as you can see here, which did not exist in the 80s, this is circa 2020 March when this was produced, demonstrates that the real fluid heat engine of the system is likely vertically below the contention pit / the contention mine, underground mine, rather, being the reason that Tombstone is famous. I mean, this is the 1,000-foot, 10-level underground mine that brought everybody into town in the late 1800s and brought, Wyatt Earp and Doc Holliday and all the characters around that whole episode. So it's really, just a little bit of a quirk of history that Santa Fe Mining wasn't able or interested in drilling the main target. So we're going to be the first to do it. And it's a great, exploration upside to have on top of, or rather underneath, an already developed prospect that just continues to grow with very compelling leachable gold silver grades.
Yeah, it sounded like you were going back around that whole 16 anyway, but now even more reason to keep drilling deeper. What about that almost partial target we see there down in the south? You briefly touched on it, but I don't see any other drill holes around there. So is that just, I guess, an earlier stage CRD target that you're hoping to work up this year?
Yeah, like that's just I would say the constraint of having a budget exploration dollars as a junior. We have built drill pads up there. When you keep hitting on your primary target, you typically you keep going on it. So that's why you see the concentration of drilling towards the north. And now we're starting to work our way south. So perhaps if we're having a similar style of update in the fall and we've completed, another round of shallow and deep drilling, you'll see us growing to the south. So there's no geologic constraint to the south. And actually, if you can see, can't zoom in much more here, but on the plan map, there's some sort of east-west lines. So those are historic trenches. We didn't trench them, but that was a continuation of this high-grade system that strikes north-south along the contention trend. So that's just a continuation of it that hasn't been fully drilled off or developed yet. So it's all really upside to the south here as well.
All right, then, Simon, what needs to be done for you guys to start drilling this? Permitting wise, money wise, give us a roadmap to when we could see maybe a test of these CRD targets.
Yeah, so the money wise to complete 3 holes would be about 1,500 meters, give or take, of core drilling. So that's a small program. That's not going to be super expensive. The bigger cost component will likely be, around, it's all subject to further approval and whatnot, but conceptually, we're looking at 3,500 meters. So call it a 5,000 meter program. Permitting wise, it's a 1 day permitting process here because we own the surface, underground, and water. So that's a little bit different than people operating on or companies operating on BLM or forest land or crown land in Canada. So very quick turnaround for permitting. It's more of a notification. And money wise, some further capital needed, but there are some interesting concepts being considered for that. So nothing announced, nothing being negotiated, but we'll figure out how to drill these in due course.
Okay. Simon, that brings us up to speed on this news release. For everyone listening on our podcast, I will also be posting these figures in the show notes so you can take a look at these figures and follow along. We will also have this video up on YouTube so you can see these figures as we talk through them. Be sure to read over that news release. Send me any questions you have for Simon, and I will get him to address those for you. Simon, thank you for this update. Thanks for walking us through these new targets, and please keep me up to speed on the progress towards drilling them.
Corey, yeah, thanks for the opportunity, and I absolutely will. Have a great day.